Hydraulic rescue tools are primary in vehicle extrication. Nevertheless, good rescue teams train with evolutions using hand tools as a backup. These techniques can save lives when hydraulic tools fail or you are called to a multiple vehicle scene. The training objectives are to present uses and general operating procedures for air chisels and reciprocating saws, to present uses and general operating procedures for manual jacks, to demonstrate hand tool techniques for hood access, to demonstrate door and window techniques using hand tools, to show roof access techniques using hand tools, to demonstrate trunk tunneling with hand tools, and to show interior procedures using hand tools. Everything from simple striking, prying, and cutting tools to rescue tools powered by electricity, pneumatics, or gasoline can be considered a hand tool. In this section, we'll demonstrate air chisels and reciprocating saws. Before using these tools or any tool in vehicle extrication, check what's inside the area you are cutting. There are many hazards in vehicles you must avoid. When cutting, hand protection and impact-resistant eye and face protection must be donned. Anyone near the cutting operation should have hearing protection. Patients and rescuers should be protected from sparks and flying debris. Any electric tool that can create internal arcing or sparking should not be used in a flammable atmosphere. When working with air chisels or reciprocating saws near patients and other rescuers, operate the tool a short time and then stop and listen. Communicate with others working at the scene before continuing the cut. Do this frequently. The air chisel is a good tool for cutting sheet metal and other vehicle parts. It has 5 components: an air supply, air regulator, hose, the chisel, and cutting bits. Air chisels measure pressure in pounds per square inch or kilopascals, abbreviated PSI or kPa. Rescue air chisels generally have pressures that range from 90 to 200 PSI or 630 to 1400 kPa. Air is supplied by an SCBA air cylinder or portable cascade system. With the air pressure set and the trigger button depressed, a piston inside the housing moves back and forth to make contact with the end of the chisel bit. This moves the bit forward and penetrates into material. There are many designs and styles of chisel bits that can be used for different applications. 3 of the most common used in extrication are the panel cutter, used for cutting single-layer sheet metal, the curved cutter, used for cutting heavy gauge metal, such as door hinges or hood brackets, and the narrow flat chisel, used for cutting and shearing off bolt heads. Safety precautions to remember when using air chisels include: use only the manufacturer's recommended chisel bits. Adjust your pressure settings for the task to conserve air and stay within the rated air pressure of the tool. Point the air chisel at the ground when carrying it, and keep your fingers away from the trigger until you are ready to cut. Another pneumatic tool usually found in the air chisel kit is the impact wrench or impact gun. This tool is very useful for disassembling components on a vehicle that has bolts exposed. Reciprocating saws are another popular and versatile cutting tool for vehicle extrication. A reciprocating saw equipped with a metal cutting blade with 10 to 14 teeth per inch, or TPI, can cut through most metal components except for advanced steel. When removing windshield glass, use a wood cutting blade with 5 to 6 TPI. Most reciprocating saws are powered by electricity, using batteries or power cords, but there are gasoline and pneumatic versions. All make very controlled cuts. Reciprocating saws produce fewer sparks and airborne debris than rotary saws, but they can be a noisy tool when used in close proximity to patients. Various types of manual jacks are used in vehicle extrication. Jacks designed specifically for fire service use, such as the high-lift first responder jack, are best suited for extrication operations. A movable jacking carriage fits around the shaft and has 2 ratchets on the notched side of the shaft. One ratchet holds the carriage in position, while the other works with a lever to move the carriage up and down. The base of the first responder jack is larger than that of a standard high-lift jack to provide increased stability for lifting, winching, pushing, and pulling. Safety precautions for using this jack include: always inspect the jack and use only if it is in good condition, has no missing parts, and is properly lubricated. Securely chock, wedge, and block the load to be lifted. Place the jack's base on a firm, level surface. Stabilize when needed with cribbing, hand tools, and other surfaces. If this isn't possible, restrain the jack with a strap or chain. Know the maximum rated load of the jack and don't exceed it. The safety retainer pin must be completely inserted and locked before any load is lifted. Before using the reversing mechanism, make sure the handle is in the neutral position parallel with the steel bar. Carefully pump the handle up and down to raise or move the load. Do not use an extension or cheater bar on the jack handle. Watch the load and jack carefully and stop lifting if either one starts to shift. Continue only when safe to do so. And remember, if you lift an inch, crib an inch. As for all rescue tools, follow your organization's procedures and manufacturer guidelines. Let's start with hand tool techniques for opening the hood, a basic step for battery disconnection and power shutdown. If the hood release doesn't function, one option is to attack the hinges. Use a Halligan bar or similar prying tool to force the hood and fender apart, exposing the hinge. Then insert a wedge to hold up the hood. Expose the hinge on the other side in the same way. Cut the hinges on both sides using a reciprocating saw or air chisel. Lift the hood upward and toward the front of the vehicle using the latch as a pivot point. You can then lay the hood flat and cut or pry the hood latch to completely sever it. Another way to remove the hood is to cut the corners of the hood completely. Use a Halligan bar or other prying tool to bend up the hood to make a quick visual inspection. Ensure there are no electrical hazards in the cutting area. Start the cut with a reciprocating saw about 12 inches or 30 centimeters forward of the rear corner. Cut across the hood diagonally until it is severed. Cut the opposite corner in the same way. Lift the hood toward the front of the vehicle or remove it completely. If using an air chisel to cut the hood's corners, cut the top layer first and then cut the second layer, making the same diagonal cuts. Be careful to sink the bit only about halfway into the surface to prevent the bit from sticking. Now we'll show you some ways to create access and egress paths through jammed doors, and how to create an opening through a rear window. Attempt to open the door using the handle first. If the door won't open, an examination of the door will determine the best method of attack. If a latch is not badly damaged, you can often deactivate the safety lock. After preparing the door, start cutting at the edge of the door using an air chisel fitted with a panel cutter. Make a 3-sided cut around the door handle. Open the flap of metal so you can see the lock and latch mechanism. You may be able to release the lock actuator rods by moving the cogs to release the lock. If not, change to a flat chisel and separate the lock and latch mechanism inside the door. If the door is still jammed, use a pry bar to completely free the door. A second option is to cut behind the door in the rear quarter panel. Start the cut a distance equal to the length of the air chisel back from the outer edge of the door at or slightly lower than the door handle. Create an opening so the chisel bit can be completely inserted into the quarter panel. From there, you can cut the nadir pin's reinforcement plate where it attaches to the vehicle. Another option for door removal is to disassemble the door. In a side impact situation, the hinges are often exposed. You can use this as a purchase point and disassemble the door. If you see exterior bolts attaching the hinges to the body, use an impact wrench, power ratchet, or manual socket set to remove them. Once these are removed, an opening between the nadir pin and the latching mechanism is created. Try manipulating the door handle to see if it will release the nadir pin from the door latch. If not, use the air chisel to cut around the exposed latch to release the door. If the door is severely damaged, the force of a first responder jack may be used to pop the door out and down. After preparing the door, invert the jack and insert the base plate in the top corner of the door frame. Slide the lifting nose onto the top of the door sill as close as possible to the nadir pin. Secure the jack's base to prevent slipping. Operate the handle until there is a slight tension on the door. Make a relief cut on the window frame to reduce the effort required for forcing the door. Secure the door from the opposite side to prevent it from flying open. Operate the jack handle until a space is open between the strike plate of the door lock and the latch mechanism of the nadir pin. The door is forced out and down, placing stress on the lock and latch mechanism. If the door doesn't open, increase the pressure of an air chisel to about 200 psi or 1400 kPa. With a flat chisel bit placed on the nadir pin, vibrate the pin off the latch plate or sever the pin to release the door. Another option for access to patients is to widen the rear window opening. Two 4x4 pieces of cribbing are placed on the vehicle's trunk deck or hat rack. Place a large manual jack on the cribbing and pull the lifting nose up until it makes contact with the roof in the area to be raised. Operate the handle of the jack until the trunk deck and rear seat move down and the desired opening is achieved. If more space is needed, remove the trim and plastic along the roof line to look for potential cutting hazards, and then cut along the top of the seat posts. Now let's look at techniques for roof access with hand tools only. If the plan is for total roof removal, make sure you cut the seat belts and locate other hazards. Use a reciprocating saw to cut the posts, starting with the post furthest from the patient. Make sure all rescuers know which post will be the last to be cut. Normally, this will be the post closest to the patient. Position rescuers on both sides of the roof to support it, then make the final cut. Another option is to remove a roof panel, leaving the side structure of the vehicle intact. Angle the saw at about 45 degrees while cutting to reduce the blade's penetration inside the vehicle. Once the entire roof skin is removed, the transversal structural members are exposed. It becomes clear where to make the most efficient cuts to remove them. Before the final cut, make sure sufficient personnel are positioned to support and remove the roof panel. Trunk tunneling creates a space nearly as large as total roof removal and does not require hydraulic cutters. It does take more time, however. The first step is to remove the rear window glass. If normal trunk opening features are not operable, use an air chisel to cut around the trunk lock mechanism. Lay the cut panel down, then insert a narrow, flat blade screwdriver into the keyway and twist to release the latch. Remove the trunk contents, cut the lid supporting arms, and remove the lid. Some trunks have struts to support the lid. Pry off the struts with a prying tool or screwdriver. Remove the carpet material and the material covering the rear deck. Look under the deck and remove any components that might interfere with the cut. With the rear deck exposed to the bare metal, use an air chisel or reciprocating saw to cut the deck. Cut vertical support members and the panel that supports the rear seats as low as possible. Then remove the back cushion. Cut any additional support brackets to create as much room as possible. Once the seat cushion is removed, there should be a large opening between the roof and the vehicle floor. The steering column pull is used when you need to move the entire steering column. First, remove the windshield completely. Place the piece of cribbing across the windshield from the firewall to the roof, directly above the steering column. If the roof is unstable, place another 4x4 along the top edge of the roof next to the first 4x4. Place a manually operated jack on the cribbing over the steering column. Connect the chain to the jack. The chain's hook should be connected to the chain after it is wrapped around the steering column and over the jack. Operate the jack until sufficient space is achieved to free the patient. You can also lift or jack the steering column. Position the jack so that the base is on top of the transmission tunnel and the lifting nose is at the top of the dash, above the instrument panel. Wrap a chain around the base of the steering column and over the jack's lifting nose. Operate the jack to lift the steering column away from the patient. The steering column can also be lifted with the jack's base positioned on the rocker, near the base of the A-post. Lifting or jacking the dash is chosen when the goal is to move the dash upward. When selecting the size of the jack, consider the distance the dash needs to be moved. Then, begin by removing the front door. Sever any center console connections to the dashboard. Using an air chisel or reciprocating saw, cut a notch in the upper A-post or between the front door hinges. Make 2 cuts between the door hinges on the lower A-post. Cut the upper A-post 1/3 of the way down from the roof. Make cuts behind the strut mounts to disconnect the front suspension and front structure of the vehicle. Position the jack base on the rocker panel at the base of the A-post. Place the jack's lifting nose in the notch cut from the A-post. Place cribbing in line with the jack base, between the rocker panel and the ground. Operate the jack handle until sufficient clearance is made. Evaluate and maintain the integrity of the cribbing. Before removing the jack, it may be necessary to place a wedge in the lower A-post cut so the dash won't move down on the patient. To roll the dash, remove the door if necessary, and then make a horizontal cut to the lower part of the A-post. Make additional relief cuts as needed. Then, using a manual jack, position the base on the B-post and the jack's lifting nose on the area just above the top hinge of the A-post. Operate the jack until the dash rolls forward. Check the cribbing and insert a wedge in the gap created in the A-post before removing the jack. At vehicle extrication scenes, rescuers must consider all reasonable options to get victims out of the wreck and into medical care as soon as possible. Superior knowledge of your equipment is part of the job. The effective use of hand tools in combination with or to replace hydraulic tools is essential to your team's effectiveness. In this program, you have seen how to use air chisels and reciprocating saws, how to use manually operated rescue jacks, techniques for forcing access under the hood and through doors and the rear window with hand tools, hand tool techniques for roof access, trunk tunneling using hand tools, and methods for removing interior obstacles with hand tools. The real power source in any extrication operation is you, coupled with your training and knowledge. The ability to use all the tools at your disposal is critical to the success of your mission.